You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for the show. And as promised, of course, we've got Revenge of the Sith. That's right. Last one of the prequels, actually. And we still had to decide what we're going to do. I mean, I'm thinking we should probably just go more or less in order when we do these things. At least in order of the franchise. So Solo would be next, and Rogue One.
Okay.
And then maybe go to the sequels. Just because, you know, if we do it the other way, then it's going to be Force Awakens, and then Rogue One, and then Last Jedi, and then Solo, and it's just going to be really weird. So it's kind of like, I mean, even though technically we didn't go in chronological order to begin with, but
this time, right?
Yeah, we
at
can
this point though, it makes more sense though.
Yes, yeah, and that's basically it. And actually, you know, I never really thought about this before, but this would probably be the ideal way. Remember when we did that whole show about what's the best order to view these things?
Yeah.
Well, the order that we reviewed them, I think, is probably the best order to watch them. Original trilogy, prequels, then Solo and Rogue One, then the sequels. Yeah. But yeah, we got the mother load of the movies this time, and you know, we'll actually get into the you know, to the thing pretty quick because we got a lot to cover on this one. There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot here. I mean, on this one, honestly, it's funny because I rewatched it. You know, we were supposed to do this last Monday. I rewatched it Super Bowl Sunday, actually. And you know, I wasn't feeling good or whatever, so I had some time to do it. And it's amazing because just watching it again, and I have rewatched the other ones too before we reviewed them. But there, like you said, there's just so much in this one. I mean, just so much to deal with. And you know, it's funny how our little PowerPoint decks that we use to help us along this discussion keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So
yeah.
So I mean, you know, this thing basically starts out with the epic opening battle. You know, it's funny because whenever we talk about space battles, I always forget about this one, and yet this is probably maybe the Battle of Scarif because it goes on a bunch of different fronts or whatever, but this is by far, I think, the most elaborate of the space battles.
I don't know. I think it's between this one and the Battle of Endor.
Yeah, Return of the Jedi. I don't know.
Endor was kind of massive though, because I mean, it was just an onslaught. I mean, it was like Fireflies. I mean, this was, don't get me wrong, this was kind of
Can we do a Duel of the Fates? Back when we were doing the whole Duel of Fates segment during our show, didn't we do like a Scarif versus Endor versus this one? Or maybe it's another one.
This one was included. But I think what made this one, I mean, don't get me wrong, like in scale, I think this is about the same size as Endor.
However, it has to be, if not bigger.
But I think you don't really get to see it because we're so focused in the cockpits of Obi-Wan and Anakin.
Yeah,
so you really don't see it from that perspective. You know what I mean?
Right.
You kind of see it in a.
Well, it's kind of like, and it's funny because that's why I was glad that they had, you know, that I was able to find this still of it, because I think if they had kept it at this scope, right, if you saw more stuff like this, you would actually get the whole, hey, this is ridiculously huge. But, you know, and it's funny because what you bring up was what I was thinking when I was watching it last week. You know, I was kind of like, man, you know, you got this like epic space battle. You spend time and money pretty much animating this, and all we're really seeing is Anakin and Obi-Wan in the cockpit most of the time. Although it is cool how they do the whole, you know, like when they're flying, they show how they're flying in perfect sync, and I think that shows kind of the growth of them as Jedi in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think that was really cool. Just the syncness of not just Jedi, but Master and Apprentice.
Mm-hmm.
that connection, and then also friends too. Like they know,
Yeah,
it's like when your friend can finish your sentence for you. You know exactly where they're going with a particular joke or something like that. Like
we do that on the
they just
show.
exactly. So yeah, so it's definitely cool. I love that. I did pick up on it. I definitely think that was intentional. When this opens up.
Yeah, I mean that was not only was that intentional, but I think it. And honestly, I have to say that because this is obviously getting us to the point where they're going to land to save Palpatine. I think the cool part about this is that it's showing us kind of like what we got on Geonosis and stuff like that, the Jedi ground battles. This is giving us an epic Jedi space battle that showed, look, the Jedi weren't just these guys, these old style fighters that would duel and, like force powers and lightsabers and stuff. I mean, these guys actually were flying missions and, they were right there. They were good pilots.
Hmm.
And I think that you have to
Absolutely.
basically, when Obi-Wan references in episode 4, when he's talking about his father, when he's talking about Anakin, it's like, he was a good, a great pilot and a good friend or whatever. You have
Hmm.
to establish that great pilot thing. And I
Yeah,
think they did a really
definitely.
good job here.
Hmm.
Yeah. All right. So, after that, of course, they're landing on the ship, and this is where we start to really, I think, honestly, this is where they start to deliver on the promise of this legendary friendship. Up until
Yeah.
now, we've seen glimpses of it, we've seen hints of it, but I think this is the first time this whole scene and what follows. This is when you get that familiarity. When you go back and watch the Clone Wars animated series, which takes place before this is where you start to really see the results of that.
Yeah, definitely, man. And you once again you see the kinship, the friendship, the master apprentice side of things. Because at this point, he's not a Padawan anymore. That's one of the big things
Yeah.
that we also have to make mention of in this is that Anakin is no longer a Padawan. When we
Hmm.
last left him, he was still a Padawan learner. And as Padme so
Yeah. Yeah.
eloquently pointed out, and at this point now he's a full-on Jedi. So now they're equals, right? I mean, Obi-Wan is still considered he's a master at this point. He's considered a Jedi master, but they're more or less, saying like on even playing field, so to speak.
Right. They're more colleagues at this point than just um, you know, just the whole yeah, like master apprentice strictly or whatever, because there's a couple of things about this that I really thought were cool too. I mean, that whole beginning thing, I mean, there were enough slides I had included in this. I wasn't going to include every little stage of the, because I mean, I just started to
Right.
realize like how vast just this intro battle was, right? From the time that the opening crawl is done to the time that they crash land on Coruscant, it's like there's a lot that goes on here. There's
Hmm.
a lot of funny parts, R2D2. He's trying to hide. Obi-Wan's talking to him through the communicator. He's trying to,
Yeah.
keep it
Kind
quiet and throws it like in a, I don't know what that was.
of yeah, there is a lot that you can say comes from, this I guess this section of the film, when you're looking at the dynamics. You got a lot of the friendship, like I said, a lot of the kinship. You're starting to notice little things like, okay, like Anakin is no longer a Padawan now. Their senses are pretty much right on with each other. We saw a glimpse of that in episode 2 with Padme, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like, I sense something. Yeah, I sense it too. But then this time, it's kind of like they didn't even have to do that this time. It's like they're in the elevator, they get attacked by these droids. It just kind of glance at each other and they both just went into action. So I mean, you get to see once again just how close these two guys are, and you see the brotherhood. That's really what it is. It's more like you really start to see them as, big brother, little brother type thing. And that's really cool.
which of course they have to do because in order to set up the big fall, you have to see how close they are. And that was one of the things that I always thought that, thank goodness that Lucas had the foresight or whatever to do that here because, yeah, after seeing Attack of the Clones, I can't actually say there were really that many missed opportunities. The problem is you just need to see more of them. And I think that this extended opening sequence gives you that. It gives you a ton of humor, which, I mean, some of the humor in this was just hilarious.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was just so funny. And then, kind of like you said, the ease at which they're working together. They're teasing each other like brothers. You get the sense of experience in this that not only each one of them, I mean, Obi-Wan is a master, and then, of course, Anakin no longer really a Padawan. He's a full-blown knight at this point. And because of this war, you could tell, like, it's just, to us, it'd be a really big battle. To them, it was Monday. I mean, it was just another typical...
Another day at the office.
Another day at the office. And they've actually learned, it's become so routine to them that they can make jokes about these crazy situations because they always figure they're going to get out of them. And, of course, we'll address that as this whole thing goes on because that kind of humor plays out through the entire movie. I mean, until it pretty much falls apart and goes extremely dark in that third act. But, and then, of course, we get that here, right? So now we get Dooku round 2.
Yeah, definitely. And here comes the humor part because,
Yeah, I know
Obi-Wan says, this time we'll take them together. And Anakin's like, I was about to say that.
Yep.
It was a play on, what happened last time they were in this situation. So like he's just said, it's definitely, now they're confronting who they know is a powerful Sith Lord. But they still kind of have that kind of, jokey disposition about themselves, even with the Palpatine, which, I know you always say, Palpatine had to give the biggest eye roll in his head.
Oh,
because, Palpatine makes the comment, well, be careful. He's a Sith Lord. And Obi-Wan's like, well, Sith Lords are our speciality. And Palpatine had to be sitting here like,
just
please.
Oh yeah, whatever. Exactly. That if I were Palpatine, that right there would have just taken me. Like, you know what? I'm done. My lightsaber's drawn. This guy's irritating me. Because if you think about it, Palpatine was always trying to put Obi-Wan in harm's way.
Yeah.
Because he wanted full access to Obi-Wan. Yeah.
To Anakin, yeah.
So, it's like, it's gotta frustrate him that Obi-Wan keeps surviving all this.
But what's also crazy about this duel again is once again, Obi-Wan gets dispatched again rather quickly and is left with Anakin just alone holding it down. And that's the thing is like, he's all like, oh, Sith Lords are a specialty. Then why are you getting flung around every 10 seconds?
It's kind of like, and then you're out of it in like 2 minutes or whatever, I mean, I thought
exactly.
There is irony in that. And I'm sure that wasn't lost on Palpatine either. And it was just really cool to see, because this is the first time where we actually see Palpatine in the middle of any action, which of course continues on. Now in the book, in the novelization of this movie, man, this whole, beginning scene was really drawn out, and you got a lot more of the whole Palpatine, Anakin, Obi-Wan thing. It was just so weird to see Palpatine on the adventure with them. And then, of course, witnessing their humor and, and he still has to pretend to be the kindly Chancellor, which I thought was pretty cool. So, yeah, I mean, it was... I just thought that the whole duel also was handled extremely well. When... Dooku was kind of like, well, you have fear, you have anger, but you don't use them. I mean, it's like foreshadowing, right? It's basically like, look, you obviously have some of this dark side stuff going on. Why aren't you using it to your advantage in this battle? I mean, Dooku, I think, legitimately was a little perplexed.
Well, yeah, because that's something that he did even when he was a Jedi. That's the
That's
thing,
true.
and even Master Windu, his whole style is kind of predicated upon that, like using some darkness within it to gain an advantage or to gain that extra bit of strength. What also is cool about this whole scenario or this whole battle is that we get to see the growth of Anakin, as a swordsman.
Hmm.
You really get to see like, okay, he's not playing this time. He's actually really, really good. And he's hanging with Dooku, who arguably is probably one of the better swordsmen in the entire, um, actually probably in the entire saga, really, next to Yoda or something like that. But um, so we get to see once again the elevation of Anakin, and having Obi-Wan out of the way dispatched kind of allows that to be showcased.
Well, another point, you brought this up a little earlier. I meant to say this a little while ago, actually. One of the things that is cool about this duel is that when you're pointing out the differences between when they faced him and Attack of the Clones. So when
Hmm.
they faced him in Attack of the Clones, it was kind of like they were shocked. It's like, oh, the Sith Lord. I mean, they were hesitant. They were, but like you said on this one, they're making jokes. They're almost ignoring Dooku in the first like 2
Yeah.
minutes of the thing. They're just kind of talking back and forth like he wasn't even in the room. I mean, that's how different this whole thing was. I mean, if I were Dooku, I'd be like, guys,
You
hello,
know I'm here,
Sith
right?
Lord, right? Like, I'm about to try and kill you guys here. You know, they're making jokes, probably like making plans about what they're gonna do after the. I mean, that's where they were at during this thing.
Hmm.
But of course, in this duel, and what was also cool about this too was that you can, during certain parts, Palpatine kind of revealed a little of the Sidious when he's like, yeah, yeah, or something like that.
Yeah.
And he kind of had that Sidious voice, almost like he was one of those high school football or like those college recruiter guys that are going to the high school games and seeing, what the
Hmm.
players have. That's
Yep.
kind of what Palpatine was doing.
He's like, okay, yep, that's good. I'm seeing, but he's feeling it too, and that's still like the biggest mystery to me, is that he can feel everything that's going on between
Hmm.
everybody,
Yeah,
but none of his is actually revealed. Like I just think that is like that can't be lost in this,
that's
because
true.
of course Dooku is bringing this stuff out. Like you have anger, you have fear, but you don't use it, and of course Sidious or Palpatine, he can feel that, but still he keeps his hidden. So it's kind of interesting and weird at the same time that goes on.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I basically felt that way during this whole thing, right? I mean, up until the time that he finally reveals himself,
Hmm.
you're he's like in the same room as these guys a lot of times. It's just like,
Exactly, the most powerful ones at
yeah,
that.
right.
That's the thing
It's
that always trips me out. It's not just any Jedi, but you got the entire council in his chambers at one point, and he's blocking out all of them,
Yeah,
all of
it's
them.
like nobody senses even the least bit of like, this guy's got some dark thoughts over there. I mean, I don't, nothing.
Yeah, I mean they do realize that they can't feel him, and that makes them cautious because that's extremely odd.
But here's the thing that's interesting about that, though. In order for them not to suspect him, because you would think that if he was blocking that out, there would be somewhat of a force vacuum around him. But it's almost as if not only is he blocking out his darkness, he's projecting light or something. Like, hey, kindly old senator, pay no attention to me, that kind of thing.
No, I don't think he's projecting because everything I've read about it, it was more so like they just couldn't feel him, and that was just like
But
because
don't you
in the
think that
Force,
that would
you
make
feel
you,
life forms.
yeah, but wouldn't you
That's
feel a
what
little
made him
suspicious?
suspicious.
Well,
Well,
yeah.
that's what made them send Anakin over. I mean, I'm sure we're getting to that, but
Yeah, well,
that
and
was the
that
whole
is,
reason
that
why was
is,
because
yes, that's
it was
true.
so odd. It's like, how are you a life form,
Right.
especially when like you're in the midst of, like I said, the entire Jedi Council practically piled into his office,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all sitting around, not including, including the most powerful ones, Yoda, Windu, those two alone, and they're all in there, and they're like, okay, they're not going to say anything to him about it, but in their own private chambers, it's like, yeah,
They're
the
quietly
fact that,
making some moves, yeah.
yeah,
Well, and then of course, towards the end of the duel, right? This is where Anakin has to make his first choice, which
this look, old Dooku's face is
oh, I know.
hilarious.
I mean, there's a couple of different but I mean, I love this one. I'm like, oh yeah, this one's getting used. This just says it all. Where,
That's
you
that oh
know,
crap moment.
well, and the thing that's funny is, I mean, there's been a lot of discussion around this too, but there's the thing where he has them, and Anakin is still. I mean, this is the first time again we see that play from Palpatine to Anakin, where it's like, well, I should turn him in. No, he's too dangerous, which of course is funny because that flips around, and that's the very thing that Mace says to him later on, right? Which I think,
Right.
which is kind of weird that Anakin made the choice that he made then, but we'll get to that when we get to it. But on this one, it was funny because, yeah, he was doing the whole, no, we should take him in. He's got to stand trial and all this. And then, of course, he lets out his sidiousness again, where he's just like, do it, and then, of course, Anakin, I mean, what are
Lops
they?
off the head.
Yeah, pretty much lops off that, which was actually pretty, when I first well, actually, we saw this together. I don't know about you, but when I first saw that, I was like, man, this is okay. This movie is definitely taking dark.
Yeah, I mean, he basically decapitates him.
This was not the sanitized PG-13 version of this. It was.
But then again, we saw that in 2 when Mace Windu went on Miguel Cabrera on.
Yeah, but I mean, it was kind
on
of.
Django.
But it wasn't. I don't know. Maybe it was because it was in a helmet, and they kind of. I don't know. It just seemed like it wasn't quite as violent and visceral as this was. And maybe
well, yeah, he's basically making a scissors with some lightsabers. I mean, it's kind of.
It was interesting. It was very interesting. And of course, this is the first. Well, I mean, really, if you stop and think about it, Anakin's slowly been making darker choice. I mean, let's not forget the whole Sand People massacre and some of that stuff, right? I mean, that was pretty bad too. And of course, we overlook it because we go, well, they're Sand People. I mean, I would have done it too.
Right.
And this is his continual walk, and it's interesting because through this whole film, Sidious is mentoring him without him even realizing it's happening. And I think that part's cool, and nobody really says anything because it's like, well, it's Dooku. I mean, I guess
now
it's
I bring
okay.
this up because there's been some speculation on this. So, because you may mention about it a second ago when he let his sidiousness slip out.
That's gonna be a new term now.
Yeah. All right, hey man, your sidious is showing.
Your sidiousness is yeah.
But do you think that Dooku knew who he was really?
Well, there has been a lot of speculation on that. And yes, I think it was, and I think with Tales of the Jedi and all that stuff, that was almost further muddying the waters in a way, where he's not really, but I think he knew. Unless the only thing that supports that theory though is, he was just kind of like whatever, and then when he heard Palpatine, go do it, and it was in the Sidious voice, it was almost like that was the moment of realization for Dooku, like, no.
Yeah, it was like, so here's where I landed with it. I think that because at one point, yes, you do hear him, and it looked like that was his first time realizing that those were like one and the same. Like,
yeah.
Oh, Clark Kent is Superman,
Yeah.
that type of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's kind of what it made him look like. But in episode 2, he made mention to Obi-Wan. He said, "What if I told you that the Galactic Republic was in the control of a Sith Lord?" You know what I'm saying? Like, now he could have thought that it could have been someone else,
Oh, I see what you're
but
saying. That like
you see what I'm
Sidious
saying?
was pulling the strings, and Palpatine was just a victim, like everybody else. And then to
Yeah,
find out they're actually one and the same, like really?
yeah. Like, oh crap.
Yeah, I mean that definitely supports that. I mean, hopefully nobody's really chatted in yet, but hopefully if anybody's watching this in the comment section, you guys actually, after of course you hit the like and subscribe button, that yeah, because that's a good point. That is a really good point. Whether or not, because everybody always assumed that Dooku knew who Palpatine really
Hmm.
was, but there is a lot of evidence, particularly in this film, that's to the contrary of that. When you really put everything together, it kind of speaks of maybe he didn't. All right, so now we get to the point with the whole rescue, and of course this was hilarious too. Just to see Palpatine being, and this poor guy, he's being dragged, and I mean, if at any point you gotta wonder if he was just like, you know what, I could just be Sidious right now and not
Hmm.
have to go through all this. This is a guy that
Once
was
again,
committed to the role. Let's just put it that way.
yeah. Once again, it's the total Clark Kent Superman thing, right? There's times when he's Clark Kent, he has to act like he's some bumbling, nerd, and he's the weakest guy on the planet, knowing that like I can go down here and pick up this entire building if I wanted to, but I have to play the role because I have to lead these double lives. So yeah, this was hilarious because he had to act like he was so afraid, and you know like Obi-Wan gets, was it Obi-Wan who gets knocked out? No, he when they fell down that little shaft.
Yeah, it was Obi-Wan. It's always Obi-Wan.
Yeah,
It's a
right.
wonder that Obi-Wan got through the Clone Wars with as many times as this
I
guy. He's more
know.
clumsy than Chevy Chase. I mean, it's insane. And what's really funny about that too is there was a line in the novelization of Revenge of the Sith that I was actually, because this is the one time where I think it was the only time where I actually read the novelization before seeing the movie. Now, I did that with
Hmm.
Attack of the Clones too. Yeah, that's right. I did that with Attack of the Clones because with Attack of the Clones there was this whole additional story on Klieglar's going out to try to rescue Shmi and all that stuff. And I
Yeah.
was like, really? There's none of that was in the film. And it was the same thing with this. Like I said, this was a much, much longer scene than what's
Hmm.
portrayed in the movie. And one of the lines, I wish I can remember the exact line, but it was something along the lines of, you know, so this is what you guys are doing when you're out on your adventures, because and it was the funniest thing because it was coming from Palpatine, and I'm like, I really want to see Ian McDermott deliver that
Crack a
line.
joke. Yeah.
Yes, that would have been the best, and it wasn't there. And that's when I vowed
Right.
I would never read the novelization before seeing the film, because honestly, for some reason, the Star Wars novelizations of the films are way better than the movies themselves. I mean, I
Oh
guess
yeah, because you got some more
yeah.
detail that you can put so much. In the movie you have to encapsulate so much in a time period, but
Well, but the
um
reason why I bring that up is because usually when it's the other way around, right? Like take Jaws, they make a movie out of the book. Anytime they do a film adaptation of a book, you can understand why the book is better because there's a lot of subplots and there's a lot of things or whatever, different descriptive elements to it that they can't necessarily capture on film. So you get that. But when the film is the source material, sometimes you would almost think it would have the opposite effect, but I guess pretty much it's kind of the same thing. Like you said, I mean, you could afford to go into more detail because it's a book.
yeah, and the perspectives you can have what's going on in a person's head. You can write that easy, then you can communicate that on film.
Yeah,
unless you keep flashing back to a person's thoughts.
that's a good point. All right. So then, of course, they finally get him aboard the ship, and now we meet General Grievous. General Grievous, it was interesting because we actually met him in that Clone Wars short or whatever, those like, I don't know, like 5-minute animated shorts. That
Those were a lot more cartoonish.
They were more cartoonish. They were cool, though. I mean, they were really cool. And honestly, I'm going to say the V word. That's what I thought Visions would be like. I thought Visions would be more of an expanded version of that, right? Because that was sort of done in an anime style. And that was where we first met General Grievous. And now, of course, we finally get to see him in live action in a film. And his whole backstory was really interesting. It's funny. That's another thing. They went into it more in the book about he was like a Jedi or something. I don't know. He was some, or I almost don't remember. But I remember he got wounded or something, and so they saved part like his heart or whatever, and maybe his brain, and they put him in this mechanical thing, but it wasn't the best, and that's why he's coughing all the time.
Yeah, he basically they RoboCopped him,
Completely, yeah, which I thought was really interesting. And I don't know. So, what did you think of Grievous as a character?
I thought he was kind of, unnecessary, and honestly, I mean, he was cool in some aspects, but I thought he was very one-dimensional and wooden to me. No pun intended, but just like, he would make in some moments, the comment, like in that scene, the comedic relief, General Kenobi, and then he's like, Skywalker, he's like, you're a lot younger than I expected, or something like that. And he's like, General Grievous, you're a lot shorter than I expected. It's just like, okay, they're having, the war of wits, with each other. And like I said, General Grievous was cool. I mean, in some aspects, like I love the fact that he was taught by Dooku in the Jedi arts as far as how to use a lightsaber in the sense of techniques and fighting styles, but he doesn't have the force abilities of a Jedi. But the fact that he has like 4 arms, I mean, he can.
That was a cool thing.
Each arm can do something different. That gives him an advantage.
I mean, and the thing is that, so as he was portrayed in the film, I would probably agree. I mean, there have been other source material from, well, the old expanded universe, but even just taking, Disney's canon and stuff like that, taking the Clone Wars, just a lot of general things. I thought he was a really cool character that in this film did not quite live up to his potential. That's probably, to me, the best way to put it, because like you said, I mean, there were some definitely cool things. I also like the fact, and this is what made him different, is that when things got, let's just say when the odds were against him, he would run away. You don't usually see that. He's just like, all right, I'm out. See ya.
You kind of run on your Skeletor, like, until we meet again, He-Man, he runs off. And...
Yeah. This is not a guy that's staying to the bitter end, and I love that. No. I thought that was really cool. So then, of course, that's basically what happens, right? I mean, Anakin and Obi-Wan, they get their lightsabers back. Some of the droids were actually pretty funny, I thought, on this ship too.
Oh yeah.
Some of the cool jokes, and of course, it was also the first time we saw those soldiers with those like force batons. Those I keep forgetting the name of those things. It's not plasma. It's something like that though. And in fact,
but they can block lightsaber if you hit them on the ends. They can block lightsaber strikes.
Which I thought was cool that they resurrected those in The Force Awakens too. But as they go, of course, there's this whole epic crash landing, into Coruscant. And I mean, again, here are these guys like flying that basically And once the ship breaks apart, and I still love the whole joke where it's like, well, don't worry, we're still flying half a ship. And of course, the look on Palpatine's face too. I mean, that's the thing that's really funny is you got the Supreme Chancellor, and you also have, by the way, Darth Sidious himself on this mission with you. They're making all these jokes and, oh, don't worry, Supreme Chancellor, everything's going to be okay. And in his head, he's like, yeah, I know. It's like, all right, there's a few things you actually don't know. And I'm sure he's just like, I so can't wait to kill you.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Absolutely.
I mean, honestly, towards the end of this movie, when he's kind of talking about Yoda, about how, I've just been really waiting for this for a long time. To me, that would be Obi-Wan more than Yoda.
Well, he hates all of them, so it's just
yeah. Yeah, that's true.
He's trying to really... Yeah, but those were electro staffs. Yeah,
electro staffs. That's right. I mean,
I had to know the name of it. I'm sorry.
I know. No, that's good. You should be doing that. I mean, whenever we don't know something, if you can, since I'm basically switching the show, feel free to look all this stuff up. That way because we know half the information.
Well, at least we have half the information.
Yes, we have half the information. We have enough to do the show. Again, this is probably, to me, one of the coolest. This is, of course, after the landing and stuff, and, Obi-Wan's basically saying, no, you should go and take the accolades and all that. I don't need that stuff. Mm-hmm. This is one of the two examples where we really see these guys sharing their feelings for each other and really expressing their love to one another. The fact that Anakin really is appreciative of everything that Obi-Wan taught him. And he really is trying to live up to that example. And Obi-Wan in return saying, you know what? You're going to be better than me one day. I mean,
yeah,
it's just, it was really touching to see this. And again, knowing what's going to happen to these guys.
Yeah, it's got to end.
It just makes it that much more bittersweet. And I just thought that this was a great example of that. All right. Now, of course, we go to another part. And this is a thing that, and there's little elements I'm going to bring up during all this, but this is actually a really dense film plot-wise. There's a lot going on here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have, of course, the whole... Well, you had the Dooku Sidious part, right? Yeah, the Sidious part. You have what's going on between Anakin and Obi-Wan. We'll get into a lot more of the stuff, as we progress. But then, of course, now, when last we left these two, they were getting married on Naboo. Well, now we see that they're still being secretive, and now she's revealing that she's pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of...
Yeah.
And it was funny because at first, it was funny that he actually reacted happy, because at first I kind of thought he was going to be like, what?
Well, I thought, because, I mean, yeah, in his situation, it's kind of hard because, once again, he's already concealing the fact that he's married to a senator nonetheless.
Right.
And then on top of that, like, now you've gotten her pregnant, which is your marital right, but the thing is
what's going to be harder to hide those details.
That, yeah. Like, how do you? Because now everybody's going to be trying to figure out, like, okay, well, Padme, who's the father? Everyone's got questions, and she's a public figure, so it's like, okay, well, she just gave birth to these twin kids. Who's in the room? Anakin's there. Like, oh, well, he's just the protector. He's just to make sure. Like, how do you conceal that after a while? Eventually, the kids are gonna have to know that that's their dad. They're gonna go out and say something one day. It's just...
Yeah, that's true. I mean, now, it makes you wonder how this would have played out.
And yeah, since he's like literally the chosen one of the most powerful Jedi, right up there with Yoda. of course, if his kids, if they know that they're his children, well, yeah, you want to put them in the academy, in the Jedi Temple.
Mm-hmm.
So, because you don't want the risk of that, you know. So, yeah, it's just I could see why this was such a huge secret for everybody.
Well,
If you
yeah,
really play it
because
out.
and that's it. Because if he doesn't ever become Vader, this just goes on. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Grievous is dead, the war's won, that whole thing. Okay, life goes back to normal. Yeah, there's all these things. And big points to Lucas for giving her the Leia buns.
Oh yeah.
You know? I'm like, all right, I see what you did there. That's cool. You gave her the Leia buns. It's all right.
A little fan service.
Yes, little fan service. Like mother, like daughter, I guess. All right, so now we start to get into what I would say becomes the second act main plot, right? You have this is where Revenge of the Sith turns completely into a political spy thriller.
Mm-hmm.
So it begins where, Anakin gets upset because he's basically not, it's like, well, you're going to be on this council, but you're not going to be granted the rank of master. And of course, it's because Palpatine tried to get him on there because, of course, he wants a mole in the Jedi Council.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's one of those things where, again, he has met with Palpatine, and Palpatine's like, you know what, I see you're going to be the greatest of all Jedi, and they're jealous of you, and, they know you're going to be more powerful than them, and that's why they're holding you back. And he's constantly feeding the ego part, because throughout this whole film, Palpatine feeds two different things that are very critical. He feeds Anakin's ego, and he feeds Anakin's fear.
Yep.
And that's a deadly combination. And so now we're in the ego part of it, where Anakin's is like, well, you're on this council, but you're not granted the rank of master. It's like, what? Now I would just look around, like, well, who's this guy in the like? He hasn't even said anything. There's like, who are these people? Why did they get to be? I mean, and you do have to feel for him. If he's the chosen one, it's like, hello.
Well, yeah, that's what makes this so disheartening for him, is because skill set, and there has to be a part of Anakin that has to be going through his mind. He's probably at some point heard of the prophecy, because Obi-Wan eventually brings it up to him. Like, Anakin, you should know this by now, right?
Yep.
But then it's like, okay, as we said in Attack of the Clones, he feels and he can see how powerful he is.
Yep.
Everybody sees it, and so everybody knows it. And then, of course, the whole prophecy of him being the chosen one. Then on top of that, I was like, okay, I've moved up pretty quick. I've proven myself on battlefields, as we saw in the Clone Wars animation. And then now, of course, in Revenge of the Sith, he's proven himself. He killed a Sith Lord, for Christ's sakes. I mean, he's kind of like, what more do I have to do to you, for you people, for you to respect me? And that's what his biggest thing was. He didn't feel respected by everybody. Like, people acknowledged his gifts, but they didn't respect him. And it was just like, okay, well, what more do I have to do for you all to gain your respect?
And that's definitely how I think that they felt, or how he felt they felt. But the reality of it is, I mean, just looking at it from an audience perspective, I honestly think it was more that they didn't trust him. They didn't trust him with his powers. And again, this is where it gets a little strange to me, because this is the danger of when you write the Clone Wars animated series after Revenge of the Sith, because knowing that the entire Clone Wars animated series takes place between episodes 2 and 3, rewatching Revenge of the Sith, a lot of their attitude made no sense in light of the Clone Wars animated series. Because if you look at the way that they, they trust, like he had been on a mission. I mean, it was almost like, it was almost as if episode 3 took place a few years after episode 2, but it didn't.
Well, the biggest thing is not the fact of his ability. See, and this is the same thing with, and we've made mention of this before, and there's 2 points with this. One is, had Qui-Gon lived, because Qui-Gon basically, and we saw that in Phantom Menace, when Obi-Wan said, like, if you would just listen to the council, you would have been on, if you would have listened to him, you'd be on the council by now.
Yeah.
And the fact that Qui-Gon was kind of had that rogue kind of attitude towards things, and much like his master Dooku. So had Qui-Gon stayed, not stayed, but lived, I think Anakin, he would have been able to understand Anakin even more at this point and be able to kind of more or less guide him and keep him on the straight and narrow, more so than Obi-Wan, who was more straight-laced by the book. The other part of this is that it's not the fact that they didn't trust, they knew he was super powerful and they knew he was good. The problem is that, like, and they all said it, like, okay, you don't exactly do things by the book, but we can't argue with your results. I mean, you get the job done, so we just keep letting you do it, because so far you haven't torched anything yet, to the point of, but the biggest thing was the fact that his relationship with Palpatine.
Well, yeah.
And the fact that they all could not feel the force around him. And that's why I keep bringing that up.
And that's like, where the trust
you're
comes
awfully
from.
close to this person who we don't know. And we already know politicians can be snaky. And we can't, as the most powerful beings in this galaxy, we can't feel this guy. But yet he seems to be enamored with you. And you're enamored with him. That raises the question.
Well, and that's why I don't think that they fully trust him.
Right.
I mean, Mace even says, like, at the end, like, hey, if you do this, you're going to gain my trust or whatever. I mean, it was all about, but again, it flies in the face of the Clone Wars, because if you really go back and you watch the Clone Wars animated series, it's almost like they moved past all that. He's one of their main guys. They trust him. They're happy with I mean, it's almost like there's a different shift, And maybe
they do bring it up, though, at times during the Clone Wars too, because
that's true.
In different circles, like Plo Koon even said it to Ahsoka once. He's like, just like your master, and she's just like, my master's kind of, and she's always trying to defend or explain, stuff from, even with the whole thing when he thought Obi-Wan was dead and he was really undercover. Remember that one?
Oh, yeah.
And the council kind of had Obi-Wan undercover, and Anakin he went on this whole, like, trip, because he was just like, that's my brother, my best friend, my mentor, my everything. So he was like, man, I can't believe he's gone. And so he was kind of doing some dark things around that time, until he realized that Obi-Wan was still alive. And he was just like, but wait, why didn't you? He's like, it would have compromised the mission. And he's like, well, yeah, I could have helped. And, so it's stuff like that where it's like, okay. And I liken it to being a coach. Being a coach, sometimes you have maybe like one of the best players on your team, but you have to know when to use him, because even though that player knows he's good, their arrogance a lot of times will sometimes jeopardize the overall game, because they may be trying to do too much, trying to be the star and trying to be the hero. And everybody knew that Anakin loved the limelight. That's why Obi-Wan said what he said a moment ago. It's like, no, it's just your time to be in the sunlight. You take the credit. I'm gonna go. I don't need all that crap. I'm gonna just go hang out and FaceTime. What's her face?
Oh, Satine.
Duchess Satine or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Although
I think she's dead by this point.
Well, yeah, you're right.
But does anybody really die in Star Wars, though? I mean, You
I
know,
know, right? Maybe
I mean,
so
yeah, maybe go look at some
yes,
holocrons. Like memory, but yeah, and
yeah. I think that's the big.
well, and that's true, and that's a good point because there is that thing where you know Palpatine's like, okay, I need you to keep an eye on. Well, at first he doesn't say that right away. I think he says that more like during the opera scene about I need you to spy on these guys for me. Right now, he's trying to get him. He wants him to be the his representative on the council, and it looks like it's on the up and up. Like, hey, I just want
Hmm.
you to be my representative on the council. And then, of course, Anakin gets all tweaked out because they let him on the council, but they wouldn't grant him the rank of master. And so then, naturally, Obi-Wan, and this, I really thought that this scene was played well. When I watched this again, I'm like, you know what?
Hmm.
They really did a good job.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, Ewan McGregor he played this where he was just so torn. It's like, I really don't agree with this, but this is what the council wants you to do. They basically want you to spy on Palpatine. And this whole back and forth between Anakin and Obi-Wan, because Anakin, this is, once again, fueling his distrust about what the Jedi are becoming. And I think it's interesting that pretty much until he takes the name Darth Vader in this, he's still like, okay, I
Loyal.
think that the Jedi are going in a direction they shouldn't go, but I'm still a Jedi. It's basically like I'm holding on to what the Jedi should be, even though the rest of them are going astray. And this is, of course, reinforcing that whole idea and brilliantly reinforcing Palpatine, because we always talk about what a brilliant strategist Palpatine is. He's playing right into their hands. He knew this is what the Jedi were going to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's why even
Yeah,
in the
I mean,
opera scene, it's like, oh, they got you to spy on me, didn't they? And it's just like, wow.
yeah, and the fact that the fact that the Jedi were doing things that weren't. See, and this is another thing though that I can understand Anakin kind of taking issue with, and it makes sense. It was because you're telling me you don't trust me because I do some things that aren't by the book. But now you're asking me to do something that's not by the book. So which is it? Like you want me, because basically what you're asking me to do is treason.
Yeah.
It's treasonous. Like you asking me to spy on the chancellor. Like he's not just some regular senator. This guy is the leader. It's like spying on the president of the United States or something. Like that's treason. And you want me to commit the highest crime, basically, and sacrifice. I should be thrown in jail if I'm ever caught by this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, okay, well, are I can understand it from his standpoint. Like, well, if I get like, what's to happen to me now afterwards? Like, okay, what's going to be your excuse? What's going to be your proof? If there is any, what if you're wrong? Now I'm sacrificing my whole life for nothing. You know what I mean? It's just like, I can understand
Oh, yeah.
those thoughts. But then on top of that, he is thinking about the friendship and, Obi-Wan, and that's the thing that about it too. The council sent Obi-Wan to do it, to
Yep.
tell him.
Yep.
They didn't tell him when they were all in session.
Nope.
He was like,
It's just
Obi-Wan,
like,
hey man, go.
yeah.
That's your boy. Go.
Yep.
You
Go
break
put
the
him up
news
to
to
it.
him.
Yeah. And that was,
Yeah.
again, that was one of those things where it's just all playing into Palpatine's hands at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And what's great, and this is another great scene too, where, they're all on this transport or whatever, and now they're going, well, maybe he's not the chosen one.
Yeah.
Because this is where they were talking about basically what you said, where, I mean, they understand that they can't see a lot of things in the Force. They're trying to figure out what's going on. And again, I mean, this thing is turning into a whole political thriller at this point, right? Because you have a mole and he's working both sides, and people aren't sure who they could trust. And it was great because it was like they just dropped this whole spy thriller in the middle of a Star Wars film. And I think people don't take the time to really think about that fact. I think that fact honestly blows over a lot of people,
Sure.
you know? So I thought that this was cool. I thought that this was a really great conversation between them because you're seeing them in a vulnerable moment. And I really enjoyed that. All right. And so, of course, the Jedi are doubting the prophecy. And now you're getting a little bit of trouble between Padme and Anakin. You know, Padme, this is where we start to see Anakin falling apart and maybe thinking that she and Obi-Wan have something going on. And I mean, it's a really dark thing. And then, of course, one of the things I loved about this scene was when Padme is like, you know, I wonder if we're fighting for the right side.
Mm-hmm.
And that I thought was just incredible because this is that first seeds of, even before they were the Empire, even when they're still the Republic, you know, there's a lot of senators that are going, you know, I don't know where we're headed. This war is doing something to the Republic that, you know, now I'm not so sure we're on the right side of this whole thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, not only that, but it's like, the one person he felt like, okay, would be on his side is his wife, you
Yeah.
know?
Yep.
And it's like, okay, she's even kind of like, well, he's just
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
not you too, so I got you, I got Obi-Wan, like, okay, am I the only person out here that just really just wants to just, do our thing? But yeah, it definitely plays with his mental.
Yeah, which I thought that this is really cool because, again, her doubt is there. His doubt in her is starting to actually show. And, of course, this is all foreshadowing. You know, this is all completely foreshadowing what's to come. Now, I threw this in here because this is just such a cool shot. Like, this, I really was just blown away by the whole Coruscant Opera House. Of course, this is where a very key scene that we're about to get into takes place. But this is just showing you the expanse. I like the fact that we're seeing more of Coruscant in this movie. You know, that it's not just space lanes.
Yeah, it looks a lot like if you mix Gotham and Hong Kong.
Yeah. Yes.
Together.
Yes. Absolutely. It's a good analogy, actually. Well, you know, Dark Knight, Dark Side. And then, of course, we get Sith story time. And
pull up your chairs, boys and girls.
Yeah, you know what? And this was, I remember seeing this in the trailer, like the part where, you know, the dark side leads to paths that, you know, some consider to be unnatural. And of course they cut the scene up where he's like, you know, can I learn this power or whatever? He's like, not from a Jedi. And that made you actually wonder, like, oh man, what are we going to see? Because this is the other part of the story, right? Besides this whole spy thriller that's going on. And then, of course, Palpatine's like, they got your spy on me, didn't they? And he's sowing more doubt in Anakin's head about the Jedi and about, you know, the fact that they're actually trying to take over the Republic and I'm trying to stop them. I mean, it's great what he does in this whole thing. But then, of course, what I thought was hilarious is just out of nowhere, he's like, yeah, have you ever heard about this tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? And I'm like, what? I mean, okay, a minute ago, we're talking about, you know, spying and you know, the Jedi and all this, and you're busting out with the Sith. And it's like, hello, Darth Plagueis. How does this guy know? I mean, Anakin later does bring that up, but don't you think, I mean, granted, you know, it could be like a thing that he heard or whatever, but it just, and it was great the way Ian McDiarmid delivered that whole story. I mean, I could listen to this guy read the phone book, basically. I mean, just the way that he was basically talking about himself, right? Because he was the apprentice. But this is also where he starts to sow the idea that hey, I know the secret of controlling life. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely, and that's the thing what made Palpatine so great is that he was subtly, you know, um, speak to your tender points. He
Mm-hmm.
knew how to massage his ego. He knew how to incite or add gasoline to his fear, but then also he knew how to um, pique his curiosity and really like based upon his tender spots, like I know these are your dreams that you've been having, and have you ever heard of the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise? Well, he was so powerful in the Force that he can manipulate the midichlorians and even stop people from dying, and just kind of just did that and just took a pause and just
Yep.
kept looking at
Yep.
and waited just with bated breath. And, of course, Anakin is just like, wait, what? Like, Anakin was probably half paying attention to hear that part. And he was like, wait, what?
What? Like,
you
what?
know,
Well, yeah, and of course he wants to learn this power, and this is the first time too, throughout this whole film. Actually, Anakin is not as much trying to defend the system, right? He is really trying to take control now. I'm going to start to bring order. I'm going to stop people from dying. I'm going to, I mean,
hmm
even at one point,
that
even when he's
selfishness, yeah.
right. I mean, even, and of course, we'll get to it more in detail, but even when he's Darth Vader and he's facing Padme, he's just like, Palpatine, look, just join me. We'll kill him. And then you and I could be, it's almost like,
hmm
okay, a Luke and Vader moment in that sense.
hmm
It's kind of like one of those things where, yeah, okay, Palpatine, he's not cool, but guess what? We'll just off him and, we'll rule
Like
it
it's that
right.
simple.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's that simple. Like it's just something that you can do. Not yet, buddy. Maybe later. And then, of course, as you brought up, right, it's his nightmares. We start to see the nightmares that he's having about Padme and pain and all this other stuff. Now, of course, there has been a lot of speculation about, and I think this one is probably supported. In fact, I think Lucas may have even talked about it during the commentary of this movie, but the idea is that Palpatine is the one that's causing these dreams in order to push Anakin further and further into his web.
Once again, if that is true, it's just like, once again, this guy's able to do all this stuff behind the veil of using the Force, but as a Force as a veil at the same time. And that's crazy. Like when we talked about, what made Palpatine so powerful, like when we did that show, it's just like, this is what we're talking about. It's the fact that he can manipulate all this stuff in the Force without anybody else knowing about it around the most powerful Force people known to man. And,
Yeah,
and he's just
right under their noses.
creating dreams and hiding his true intentions and his whole life essence and for like you would think that he just seems to do it so effortlessly. Like, yep, just woke up and this is what I'm doing.
Well, and I mean, again, this is not only is he able to do all that, this, of course, has not been confirmed, but when you factor in the conversation that he had in the opera house using midichlorians to create life, there's a lot of speculation that Palpatine's the one that actually created Anakin and impregnated Shmi with the Force. Not that Force.
Yeah. Not
Force.
by Force, but
Yeah, it's
with the
capital
Force.
F Force. And then, of course, Anakin keeps getting denied, right? So at first it was kind of like he really wanted to lead the Geonosis mission. And then it's just like, you know what? Nope. You're too busy spying on Palpatine there, buddy. We're going to send Obi-Wan to do it. And Anakin's like, really? Because I should really be the one to go and, not to Geonosis, to Utapau. And and face Grievous or whatever. So once again, in something that would have actually made sense, they did something different because they wanted to keep Anakin around, which really, if you stop and think about it, especially when you're watching this movie unfold, they totally should have sent him away from Palpatine, honestly.
Mm-hmm. But that's the thing that they wanted him close because, and it was their undoing. You know, it was like, we wanted to keep him close so he can spy, but all you did was really put him closer to him
and push him right in. Yeah.
Yep.
And then of course we get the great battle at Kashyyyk. Now this is cool because again, this is a little bit about what we probably should have seen. Well, maybe not exactly this, but this is what Return of the Jedi could have been like if they had gone with Wookiees instead of Ewoks. But we finally get to see Kashyyyk a little bit more in depth, even though we had a big idea what it looked like, because there had been a lot of illustrations over the years, including the Planets and Moons book or something, when they would always do these essential guide of whatever. Planets and Moons is one of them. Oh, well, yeah. There is that, which, they kept a lot of that. So, I mean, it was really cool to see that. And, of course, we got to see just all these Wookiees battling the droid armies and stuff like that with the clones. And that was just a really cool thing to see. I don't know. I mean, was this something you could have done without, or were you actually happy to see this?
I was actually really happy to see a bunch of, because the only Wookiee you really knew was Chewbacca, so it was like to see the rest of his kind. Well, I hadn't.
And that weird creepy uncle that was what was that, Dinah Shore or whatever, that was dancing for him, and that weird, yeah. This is a Revenge of the Sith review, so.
Yes, thank you.
We'll leave the holiday. Hey, we did watch the holiday special, and it's on this channel. So if you guys want to suffer through the holiday special with us, making all kinds of crazy commentary, you can find it on the channel. So you were actually into this too, then?
Yeah, because you hear about how powerful and how strong these Wookiees were. The Wookiee, race was. So, yeah, to see them actually out there in their element and doing their thing, it's just like, all right, it reminded me like a bunch of Harry and the Hendersons, just running around.
That was so influenced by the Wookiees.
Oh, yeah.
But, well, the other thing, and here's the other thing that I think it did too, is that it gave you, I think more so than Attack of the Clones even, although that was when things were kind of starting, so I guess it's not fair, but this is the first time in the film that we start to see a more galaxy-wide representation of the Clone Wars in live action.
Yeah.
This is where it's really like you're seeing all these different battles. You got Utapau, you got Kashyyyk, you got what's going on Coruscant. You had that epic space battle in the beginning. I mean, you're starting to get a feel. I mean, there's only so much you're going to be able to do in a couple hours, along with telling the key story points, right? But at least we're getting a really good taste of what this galaxy-wide battle is really like.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that was cool. And, Yoda's over there, holding it down with the Wookiees. And, it's just, you eventually do see, like, as the show, as the movie goes on, you'll see the Jedi in different places like Felucia and all these different places. Like, yeah, you do get to see the wide scope of the Clone Wars.
Yeah, and where they are. And then, of course, right before Obi-Wan leaves for Utapau, that's cut off a little bit, but this is the last time we actually see Obi-Wan and Anakin as friends. And every time this scene comes up, I'm just like, oh, this is so painful. And because this is the last time when these guys see each other face to face again. It's Vader versus Anakin. He's full blown to the dark side. And it
Well, it's more
just,
of Vader version one, but yeah.
well, yeah. But I mean,
Kind of Anakin, I guess. You could bring Anakin into it a little bit.
I mean, but by the time they actually see each other,
He's fully Darth Vader at that
he is
time, but
fully Darth Vader, but it's like there's parts, and I'll get into it, where he's almost at war with himself as much as he is Obi-Wan at the
True.
end. It's just that by the time he faces Obi-Wan, I think he's fully embraced his Vaderness at that point. But up until then, he's it's kind of like he does something and then he sort of regrets it or whatever. It's a really weird dynamic, which of course we're coming up on that too, but and then of course this is actually where I believe this is actually where Anakin starts to really think that Obi-Wan, because she was like, "Oh, Obi-Wan stopped by," and it just like, just lit a fire under him. And
yeah,
he's already thinking, now here's what's really weird about this moment. He had just expressed to Obi-Wan about his friendship and how much he loves him and all this stuff. But this is showing that underneath all that, underneath that real genuine brotherhood and love and gratitude and everything that he has for Obi-Wan, there's a part of him that really does think that Obi-Wan is trying to hold him back. Maybe Obi-Wan's making a little move on Padme. It's like, are you sure I'm really the dad? I mean, did Obi-Wan maybe deliver another package at another time? I mean, who knows, right?
Yeah, I mean, his mind is all over the place because he's got so much that he's dealing with that he's out of focus, and that's one of the things that you have to do as a Jedi is you have to focus on whatever the task at hand. And this is why they don't want you to have emotional ties, because they cloud your judgment, they cloud everything that you're doing. So he's got the whole thing of, okay, they won't let me on the council and be a master. They let me on the council, but they won't grant me the rank of master. I'm having dreams about you dying, and I want to learn how to save you, but I don't know how to do that yet. Also I wanted to be the one to go out and kill Grievous. They didn't let me do that. Now they want me to spy on like my father, like mentor, which I don't agree with. I mean, that's like four things right there.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just like, and then now, Padme seems to be taking my friend's side instead of being by my side. That's five.
Right.
So it's like all these things are just welling up in him at a critical time in the war. And like I said, the big thing, this is all in the backdrop of a war going on. So that's six major things that he's got that he's really trying to deal with all at one time.
Well, not to mention
And
the
if he could
fact
just
that, well, it's like you said, he's wrestling with that because he also admits, that, look, I know I should be better than this. I know this isn't it's like this is definitely the beginning of the great big fall, right? Because now things are tipping, and they're starting to, at least. Not fully yet. Because that's the other thing I really appreciated about this movie was the fact that you felt it. Like, ooh, we're at the very edge. We're at the twilight of the way things were, and then it just goes full-blown dark. But this is kind of the edge of that. And then, of course, we got the big Obi-Wan versus Grievous moment. He drops in, does his infamous hello there, thing that, little tribute to Alec Guinness, and then it just became kind of an Obi-Wan thing. And again, I mean, I thought that this was actually a really cool battle. Started out as a lightsaber thing, and then it became that weird bike thing that Grievous had or whatever.
Oh yeah, and then he hops on that weird peacock or
whatever
he was running around on.
Yeah. I thought that was pretty crazy. But I mean, this is actually a really cool battle, I thought. I don't know if a lot of people really think about all the different lightsaber battles, but there's something unique about every single one of them. It's not just a couple of opponents going at it with laser swords. There's something there. Yeah, this thing. This bike. The Battle of Utapau, which I thought was kind of cool that they actually, once Obi-Wan started to get the upper hand on Grievous during the lightsaber battle, Grievous does what Grievous does, right? He just starts to take off. Yep, live to fight another day, and this time Obi-Wan chases him down. But what was cool about it was, again, you're seeing more of the scope of these battles, which I thought was nice. And now, this is actually a scene that I thought was really cool when he basically was like, I sense a plot to destroy the Jedi. I'm like, dude, where have you been? Now we're about to hit Act 3 into this movie, and now you're finally getting it? Like, yes, genius.
Well, I mean, kudos for him at least getting to it, because I mean they've been blocking that thing for so long. Maybe Palpatine is kind of just like feels that things are turning anyway, so he's kind of like, all right, let me let the shade down a little bit.
That could be another thing. It
could be like he knew it would draw them out to him, and Anakin it would be there to to witness.
That's that's a really good observation, actually, because I was looking at it from the standpoint of all the Jedi are scattered and they're everywhere, right? Yoda's on Kashyyyk. All the Jedi are scattered. He's the only one that's actually in the vicinity. So it would seem like the sensation that there is a plot would probably be concentrated on Coruscant. And I think that there's just enough evidence that he's looking at that it's like, this is a little strange, but that's a good point too. Maybe Sidious did do that. Maybe he's like, I'm thinking it's about time to bring this to a close. And that could very well be.
Let me sink my teeth into Anakin.
Yep. Which, speaking of which, this to me was one of the coolest scenes of the film. Because we always wondered, okay, we know that he's going to become Sidious's apprentice, but how is he going to go from kindly old man to, hey, I'm a Sith Lord, you want to be my guy, right? And the thing that I thought was really cool and actually shocked me was when he was kind of like, okay, well, the dark side is also a way, I've studied some of this or whatever. Anakin actually draws his lightsaber on him. I never expected that in a million years. I was like, whoa. And then you're thinking, well, how's this going to turn out? I mean, we know it's kind of like, is this how he's going to end up in the suit? Like, Palpatine is just going to dismember him or what? Is he going to just like, his little torso is going to hop over and go, I'll do whatever you ask. But the whole dialogue in this was incredible. How Palpatine, even with a lightsaber at his throat, was reasoning with him and trying to still influence him and keeping his cool. I mean, what a dark side master, And
he knew, like, okay, as powerful as Anakin is, I'm still more powerful.
Yeah, it's kind of like...
Two is he had leverage. He still had the high ground. And that was, I got the information that you seek. You kill me.
Well, I think he actually says that in this too.
Yeah, that's what he basically was saying to him. Like, he said, with me, he was like, I can teach you how to save the ones you love.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is just a brilliantly acted, brilliantly executed scene. Something I was not expecting that I thought was really cool. And then, of course, this I thought was actually a pretty nice twist. That was something that was done on purpose by Lucas, where after all is said and done, Obi-Wan actually has to kill Grievous with a blaster. And then, of course, he throws it away as, like, so uncivilized, which, of course, is a reference. Someone in episode 4 for a more civilized age. The lightsaber was a more elegant weapon. I mean, it just. So I thought that was actually pretty funny.
So uncivilized.
So uncivilized. And here, to me, this is kind of the final nail in the coffin. So Anakin basically goes back, tells Mace, listen, Sidious, this guy's a Sith Lord, Palpatine's a Sith Lord, we got to go get him. He's firmly on the side of the Jedi on this, right? Like, dude, we've got to go and stop this guy.
But he's the one we've been looking for. He's the one we've been chasing. Like, let's go over here.
He's the guy.
And do it.
Exactly. And the thing that kills me, this is so painful to watch this, because as much as Palpatine had done for him, and basically was kind of a mentor and almost like a secondary father figure next to Obi-Wan, as soon as he found out he was a Sith Lord, Anakin shut that off and was like, nope, gotta arrest him. Guy's gotta go. And Mace tells him to stay there. No, you stay there.
Exactly.
And this just sit.
This
and if
proves to be true, then you'll have gained my trust.
Exactly. And it's like, dude, that's the worst thing you could have done. Worst thing you could have done. This all but threw him into Palpatine's arms at this point. And then, of course,
because this. He still doesn't trust him.
No.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's just like, it was that thing. It's like, okay, like I'm turning in, like I did what you asked me to do. I'm reporting back to you, and I'm turning in someone who is close to me, and that because that's why you sent me over there in the first place. Now that I'm trying to go over there to try to help you bring him in and do the right thing, you still don't trust. Like that's where Anakin was like, okay, what? There's nothing else I can do. Nothing.
No, and it just shows. It just seemed like it was so casually dismissive. Like, well, you stay here. You're not important. That kind of thing.
And so I know why Mace did it, but for the reason why he told him to stay, because had he stayed, things would have ended differently. But
yeah. Well, and this is where we start to get into this. There's this whole scene where they cut back and forth between Anakin and Padme that I thought was just so cool, right?
Love this scene, man. Love it. And then the music is what gets me every time.
The music.
That ominous.
That
and
whole
the sunset.
ominous. Yes, the sunset. This was
like the light is going away and it's about to enter the dark. And that was just so the writing on that was just man,
that was just spectacular. Yes, absolutely. It's just like, okay.
The allegory was just phenomenal.
Yeah. So, she's sensing doom. Anakin's feeling frustrated. So, I mean, you have this whole juxtaposition, and they kept going back and forth, showing the different shots of them or whatever. And it's, like you said, right? The sun's going down, and now darkness has set. And so now, of course, Mace and a bunch of the masters go and pretty much face Palpatine. And for some reason, here's the thing that's kind of funny to me about this. Why do you think a Sith Lord would be like, well, I'm under arrest. All right, you guys got me. Let's go through the courts. I mean, really?
Well, that's why they came in just lightsabers ablazing, because they already knew. But see, my thing is, I mean, Anakin just came in and told him that. He didn't provide any proof. He didn't have any recordings or anything. These guys just march into the Supreme Chancellor's office, the powers of the Galactic Senate. It is just like, and that's why Palpatine's like, well, it's treason then. It's like, well, dude, you really don't have any proof in here.
Yeah, you're just
going. The fact that Palpatine cut those cameras off before he got up and.
Well, and that's the thing, right? So he ends it after it's treason then, and then, cuts the cameras off, which is great because once again, the Jedi is playing right into his hands. Like they're
Mm-hmm.
coming and saying your reign has come to an end and all this stuff. It's like, okay, um, what else are you gonna think? And then of course, man, this is the first time
First,
when we see Palpatine, man.
the first thing when that lightsaber slipped out from his robe into his
Yeah.
hand like a,
Yes.
oh my God, I said, what is this? I said, first of all, it just, I mean, why wouldn't he have a lightsaber? But it's just like, you just don't think of him having one.
No, I know. I always wondered,
And then,
what would it be
like,
like? Does he even have a lightsaber? If he did, what does it look like? And how would he
he
fight?
obviously read. Exactly. And this moment right here, I was just like, I had chills in the theater when we saw this. Like,
Well, you know what's funny though? So I was reading a little bit further about some of this stuff, and there was an article that came out the other day. Nick Gillard, the guy that did all the stunt coordination for the prequels. This is something that Lucas insisted on, but this was not the original duel. So the original duel had a stunt double. And it was this whole big, like, extravagant thing. I guess either the story or something was posted or whatever. But yeah, it was supposed to be a lot more complex, and it was going to be just like insane. And it had like a stunt double playing Palpatine, but Lucas was really intent on seeing Ian McDiarmid. And so what happened was, and this is where I give a lot of props to Ian, because it was like 1 or 2 days before, and he had to learn all these lightsaber moves. Like, this is a last minute decision on their part. And so now you got this guy, and Nick Gillard's going, this dude's like a Shakespearean actor, and now he's got to fight with a sword. This isn't his world,
right.
And now he's got to like do this whole crash course of learning all these moves, and yeah, it was crazy. So the fact that this duel was as cool as it was really mind-blowing. And again, for me, I really loved the whole Palpatine versus Mace duel, man. I thought that actually was the coolest of the duels in this. At least one of them.
Yeah. I mean, I still would love to know who would have won that in the actual, because I mean, we know Palpatine is more powerful than Mace, but lightsaber wise, though, I still would have loved to know if they just kept it at that, like who would have won.
Yeah, because Mace was fighting with a little of the dark side too, and he seemed to have the upper hand. And I mean, I know that Palpatine was probably trying to give him that illusion and whatever, because of course, like we see, I mean, he purposely like shot the lightning and came back on him so it would disfigure him, and he can be like, look at what the Jedi have done to me, I'm disfigured now. And of course that really sends Anakin off into a tizzy.
I think that wasn't intended, though.
Well, I think it was an opportunity type base.
Yeah, I think he used the opportunity to flip it, because Palpatine is always doing that. He's always shooting lightning at people, and then when they block it with a lightsaber, he just tries to intensify it so much to the point where it breaks you, because he's just intent on breaking you with it. But I think he just used it as an opportunity, like you said, just like, well, look what the Jedi did, It has left me deformed, and
Yeah, because I mean, if you think about it, the recordings would have been enough to sell his story, but this really sells it. And then, of course, I love it. The whole thing when they're shooting the lightning and Anakin and Mace are going back and forth. No, he's got to stand trial. It's like, he's too dangerous to live and all that. And then, of course, I mean, the big line where he's like, unlimited power. I mean, that whole scene was just crazy incredible.
The crazy part is the fact that he had Mace in such a grip because he was like lifting him up with the Force and electrocuting him at the same time, and then when he threw him out the window.
Yeah, like this.
So just like, yeah.
And again, this brings to that next point too, is that this is the second time. I mean, there have been like little choices here, but this is another time where Anakin now has the choice again. And he chooses to lop off Mace's hands and let Palpatine electrocute him, lift him, throw him out a window. Mace Windu out the window. He threw him out the window, as they say, right?
Yeah.
I know, it's terrible. But that was the thing that, again, what a great moment. And sometimes I think that because of the emotion behind the Anakin versus Obi-Wan duel, because of the whole weight between the Yoda and Palpatine duel, I think people sometimes sleep on this one. But really, this is one of the key moments. This is the moment
absolutely
that turns the galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Anakin becomes Vader. It's great, too, I'll call you Darth Vader. It's just like, all right. And then it just kind of makes you wonder, when you see that scene, is it like, are you just making that stuff up? Like Darth,
Vader.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, Vader.
I think he probably had this. I think he had this kind of planned prior to once he decided, like, okay, if I get this guy over to my side, Darth Vader is going to be his.
Yeah, right, exactly. You see,
but you gotta wonder if these names mean anything, though.
I know. I'd heard Vader that they means,
do.
Well, I mean, I could just see, like, you access like some documents and you see a bunch of names like scratched out before he gets to Vader or something. Like, was Darth he really
Charles,
like?
No. Darth George, no.
Exactly.
Carl, no.
Where you're trying to like go through, Darth Killer, Darth, whatever. I mean, it's just, what's your Darth name? That's great. Right. But I mean, this is a big moment. And of course, again, he gets him by simply, I'm going to do anything you ask because, hey, you and I can like fix this. And then, of course, once he becomes Vader, it's like, well, that whole secret, Plagueis didn't really find it out, but I'm sure we could find it. It's like,
right.
Right, dude, then, I would have been like,
my whole life.
Exactly. I threw my life and one of my masters out a window. Wait a second. Now, the contract, you clearly stated in the Opera House that you knew the secret, it's...
Yeah, now you're changing it.
And so this was actually one of the cooler scenes, too, when he ends up marching on the Jedi Temple. This is like...
Yeah.
Now he's Darth Vader, and... It's funny because I remember one of the criticisms of this film was that we didn't get to see a lot of mechanical Vader, and I think that that's what people wanted. People wanted what we ended up seeing in the Obi-Wan series, where you see mechanical Vader in his prime doing a bunch of stuff, but I think people forget that you needed to see this first,
Yeah. You need to see how he got there.
And you know what? I would have liked to have actually seen more non-suit Darth Vader.
Sure.
I thought this was sort of cool. It's almost like, and I'm sure I'll bring this up when we do Rise of Skywalker, but once Kylo Ren sort of turned back to Ben Solo, I'm like, well, he's actually kind of a cool character as Ben Solo. I would have liked to have seen more Ben Solo now. Right. And that's how I felt about this. And then, of course, we get the big executing Order 66, right? So this is the big moment where the clones now turn on their Jedi generals. And, of course, Yoda's got a little heartburn over there. He's, he's just feeling a lot
of force indigestion.
Yeah, lots of force indigestion, which, I thought was really... really kind of funny. And again, this is another seriously brutal scene that I think...
Yeah, this was actually kind of heartbreaking. Like but the music, once again,
I know,
John Williams nailed it. I mean, it was like the music that went along with this stuff, and just like you can hear the fall, like of everything. Everything just seems to be lost at this point. And you're watching Yoda's reaction in the, how all the other Jedi are responding, like Ki-Adi-Mundi, kind of just stops. He feels it. And he kind of turns around, and it's almost like too late. And like you just see the troopers just all of a sudden just stop, pull their guns up, and you're just like, man, like.
Well, thing
Had these
was,
been stormtroopers, they would have been all right. But the fact that these were clone troopers,
so I think
yeah.
I think it was Barriss Offee. It was whoever the Jedi chick was. It just were they just shooting her and just kept shooting her after she was down.
Oh yeah, man, they was dead.
I'm like,
they just kept letting her have it. Yeah,
it's
they
like,
just obliterated her, man.
Right. It's like, man, I'd be nothing left of that. Well, I mean, I'm
That's
sure
personal.
That's exactly. I'm like, was she a bad general or something? Because that's a little personal to me. I'm like, man, you guys
like, man, the clones are like in the back, like, man, when he executes Order 66, I hope I'm with Offee that day.
Right. Some people are getting transferred, just, hey, 66 is coming up. Yeah, can I get transferred to...
Oh man, Offee's detail.
Well, I guess Offee aptly named.
Yep, she got off.
They
definitely offed her.
They definitely offed her. And then of course, we get this too. This is just another brutal thing, right? He's just all Master
I actually thought this was funny.
It was
I'm sorry,
hilarious. I know. I was sitting next to you, and yeah. Because he's just all innocently.
That's the Skywalker. What are we to do? He just cuts it off, and the kid looks like, oh.
There's this meme going around that's great that, he's talking to Grogu, and he's like, listen, Grogu, you've always been really cool to me, so don't show up to the temple today. But yeah, I know. But this, again, just shows you how far gone he is, He's just like...
Yeah, man.
It's like all these kids... Nope, yeah, I know, and there's no threat. He's just like, nope. Well, I guess
that's the thing that sucks for these kids, though, because it's like... Oh, fine. Man, they probably heard of all the stories about him. Like, man, oh, he's here? Oh, we're safe now. We're good.
Yeah, right.
He's the guy. If
I were one of those little kids, I'd be like, I pledge to follow you. I'll be your new apprentice, Oh, man. That was great. And then, of course, they did do a little shoehorning of some fan service where we get Tarful and Chewbacca. And Tarful, man, he's kind of... He sort of reminds me of Black Chrysanthemum a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that they may have modeled Tarful off of that. I mean, Lucas would never admit to that, of course, but... this is a cool, even though it was sort of shoehorned in, I thought it was kind of cool because, again, it basically showed, and this is another thing that was just blowing my mind. It's like, okay, Han Solo's over there going, well, I've never seen, anything that makes me believe in this all-powerful force or whatever. It's like, dude, your co-pilot fought with Yoda. I mean, did you guys ever not talk about the Clone Wars and maybe what was... I mean...
Well, fortunately, in that scene, I don't think Chewbacca was in the room. So, if that's the case, then he got a freebie out of that one.
Yeah, maybe.
Because I think they were playing a Sabacc game, and then
he went up to the cockpit?
To the front.
That might be. But still... I mean, he may not have been in the room, but it's just like you would have thought that at some point during their tenure together that, I don't know, Chewbacca might have maybe said something. Right.
Yeah, like I remember doing the Clone Wars, man. We had to
he's part of the Battle of Kashyyyk, and he's talking to Yoda. Exactly. I mean, it's just... This is this is the danger of what happens when you try to cram a bunch of fan service in there. All right. And then, of course, this is kind of a weird thing to me, man. Seeing, Yoda and Obi-Wan like that on the Tantive 4. That was just... Because, we hadn't seen this since Episode 4. So I just
True.
thought that was like a really, really weird scene. And of course, you know, they're picking up the beacon and they realize. And of course, this is also the scene too where, Yoda, I mean, they're about to go back and see what happened, which is always comical to me because, later on, of course, they talk about how they got to face everybody. Now here, Palpatine is giving his infamous speech, right?
Mhm.
Like, well, you know what? The Jedi did this, and he's basically declaring that the Republic is now going to be the Galactic Empire. And I thought that this was a really cool thing, too, because I had always wondered, how did the Republic morph into the Empire? That was one of the things that I had been wondering through the old prequels, too, like watching Attack of the Clones and everything. It's like, well, how are you... I see how things are now. We only have one more movie to go. How are you going to make that switch?
Yeah, I mean, that's where a lot of the political things that you see in the Clone Wars, now we're seeing in the Bad Batch.
Mm-hmm.
We're starting to see those things start to come to fruition. Like, all right, now we're getting a lot of the backstory of, people kind of being disgruntled, how people feel about certain things, and the seeds of discord that's been, sown throughout the Galactic Senate.
Yep.
So,
yeah, that's true.
with Palpatine trying to allegedly bring peace.
Well, I thought what was cool about this is now he is Emperor Palpatine. This is really the birth of that. And of course, the brilliant line that they wrote, which he's like, this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause. I'm like, man. That gave me chills when she said that.
Yeah.
Just the way she delivered it and everything. And, because these guys are just going, whoa, time out. What? Like yesterday, right? Because yesterday it was bright in here. There was some, like, just some
20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
We were the Republic.
Right. Now all of a sudden we're an empire. This, somehow he got disfigured. And it's, they're saying the Jedi did all that. I mean, it's just, you have to look at it from their perspective sometimes.
Absolutely. Especially with her husband being who he is, she had to kind of wonder, like, what the heck is going on out there?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, when they check the security footage, I thought this was a nice touch, too. That, even though I thought it was a little bit too convenient that the cameras were going where he's being knighted as Darth Vader and all this stuff. But, and of course, I remember it was funny because Yoda, this almost mirrors the whole failure at the cave thing because, Yoda's just like, okay, you're just going to find darkness in there. It's just going to be, and then of course with the weapons, only what you take with you and all that. And Obi-Wan just has to know the truth, right? And Yoda's just like, look, it's going to be painful. You probably don't want to do this. And I think part of the reason...
Yoda already knows at this point.
Well, and I think part of the reason for that is because he knows that this is just going to make him more emotional and it could cloud his judgment because the very next thing he's going to tell him is like, you got to go kill him.
Yeah.
And then, of course, he's like, no, I can't do that. He's my brother. Let me face, Palpatine. It's like, really, dude? You just lost against Dooku in like 2 minutes. You think you're going to last against Palpatine?
Exactly. That was just about to be my point. Like, dude, you got your butt handed to you by like this guy, who's older than Palpatine at this point, and it's just like, and you gotta go get somebody who's younger and who was his master? Yeah, I think not.
See, what
he's been able to cloud and hide all this stuff from even me.
Right.
Yeah, dude, you're not that guy.
Well, and here's the thing, and you and I have talked about this several times. What they should have done was they should have both gone and taken care of Anakin, and then gone and taken care of Palpatine. Granted, I mean, Obi-Wan would have been done in 2 minutes.
And 30 seconds this time.
Yeah. But
especially with Palpatine. Because, he's been waiting to get at Obi-Wan for like the longest.
Yes.
Especially after earlier. Oh, it's just Sith Lords are your speciality, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah, let's just see how this one works for you.
Man, that would have been awesome to just have seen that. So Sith
Man.
Lord to your that would have been awesome. And this is actually part of what I was talking about. This is after he goes in, which is great, because the next thing that Palpatine tells him to do is like, yeah, listen, go take care of Newt Gunray and all those guys, which Anakin was all too happy to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I
will say the novelization of this scene.
Oh
man,
yeah.
Like when they were begging for their lives, and he was just so. The lines he was delivering in the books was just
was
crazy.
Anakin. But then they did sort of save a little bit, right? When Palpatine was all like, "Yeah, I'm going to send my apprentice Darth Vader. He'll take care of you."
Yeah, he'll take care of you. Yeah,
that little double entendre there. It's kind of like not exactly what they thought, but that was a really cool scene. But again,
when he walks in and shuts the door.
Oh.
He just walks in. He leaves R2 outside too.
Yep.
That was the
you're
cool
gonna want
thing.
to wait outside.
He just comes in just.
Well, that's another thing that was really interesting about all of this is that R2's with him the whole time. It's like, dude, you're kind of helping Darth. It's almost like going on a crime spree with somebody. R2 is now with Darth Vader. Just. Okay, I'm going to go and kill these people, just wait in the speeder, that kind of thing, which was awesome. That was just one of the hilarious things. But one of the other things, before we leave this one, is the fact that, he starts shedding a tear. It's like he's still at war in a way. He's committed to this path because he wants to save Padme, but at the same time, he knows, like, this is not good, I'm sad that I have to do this. And then, of course, Padme's learning the truth. He's killing younglings, and this is a great. I thought that this scene was acted really well too. When Obi-Wan goes and breaks the news to Padme, like, yeah, Anakin's a Sith Lord now, and he's killing people, and there was a little bit of. As straight up as this was played, and again, this was a touching, emotional scene, but it was kind of funny in a way. It's like,
it was.
Hey, just like, hey, where's Anakin? Is everything okay? Well, not exactly.
Not exactly.
And it was that line that when he looks back and says, Anakin's the father, isn't he? And she's like, yeah, it's like, it was just.
Yeah, he's just like, I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry. Yeah. That was just.
And she kind of knew. See, once again, this scene in the novelization was really good because she was like, "You're gonna have to kill him, aren't you?"
Yeah.
They didn't say it in this, but in the novel, she was like, she knew what it was like. Okay, I have to stop him. She's like, "But you're not gonna kill him, right?" He's like, "Well, if I have to, but he has to, answer for this." And the fact that, even in this scene, that he kind of stows away. He knows she's going to go to find him.
Yep.
Because he's basically, do you know where he is? And she was like, no, I don't know. And he's like, okay, I know you have ways of getting in contact with, because you guys have been sneaking around all this time, doing everything else, shall we say. So
yeah, as evident by
right, this little baby bump here.
Certain gastric regions. But yeah, well, and then the other thing that's funny too is that she's bringing C-3PO with her. It's like, 3PO and R2-D2 are kind of at these opposite ends, but at key moments, That
is very true.
And then, of course, Padme, faces him. This is another scene too that was just kind of tragic because you did kind of wonder what was going to happen as these scenes were progressing. Like, well, is Padme going to see Anakin again? Because you'd think that would snap him back. And of course, he's just too far gone. And he thinks he's doing everything for her and, for the Republic. And then, of course, he ends up force choking her, which was pretty wild, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, man, this movie just does not let up. Again, that was just something that was...
when he said, I didn't expect... Now, that's the one I didn't expect. I didn't expect him to choke her.
Yeah.
I was like, dang.
Just choking her out. I'm like, dude, It's like she's pregnant too. It's like that's
Yeah, I
very
mean,
Ike Turner of you, you know. It's...
then Obi-Wan has to like let her go, Anakin. Let her like I'm like, dang, like
Well, which of
this has
course,
gotten kind of heavy.
the thing that was crazy about that too is the fact that that's part of why he force choked her was because Obi-Wan reveals himself and he's like, "Oh, now I see what's going on between you two, and you're on his side and all that." And that's when his anger took over.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just, and it's just all these things. And at any time you can see, like, if you guys just all, sit down and kind of hash this out, everything would have been okay. Then, of course, you get on the flip side of it. I just kind of put it, I mean, this scene goes on forever, but when that whole intro scene, when Yoda shows up.
The first 2 minutes of this was just like, he walks in, he as soon as Yoda walks in, and then the guards try to stop him, and he just flings him into the wall and knocks him unconscious.
Oh.
But even Palpatine's still super calm. Master Yoda, you survived.
Yeah, I know.
Surprised at you,
I mean, and that was the other thing too. Is like their little conversation was hilariously savage.
It was. I mean, they were taking shots at each other, man.
Completely.
It was just hilarious.
I mean, that was another thing I didn't really expect. I'm like, man, these guys are about to do like a rap battle in about 5 minutes.
That's why I love that. He's like, well, when Yoda jumped in front of the doorway to block him, he's like, well, so powerful you are, why leave?
Yeah, why leave? Yeah. Yeah.
That's what we just like.
Well, the other thing that was crazy, I mean, after, of course, Yoda got chucked. I mean, when he threw Palpatine across the room, that was bizarre. Like, flipped over a chair and all this stuff.
Yeah, when his legs were in there and you could see his socks, man. I mean, that had me in tears.
I mean, and then I'm just laughing. Like, man, that was just crazy. And just the whole battle was epic. Because that was,
they gave each other their best shots. Yeah.
They did. I mean, Palpatine's chucking Senate pods at him. And I mean, it was epic in scale. It was personal enough. It was satisfying. Mm-hmm. I mean, I just thought that, okay, this is cool. Because that was one of the things that, as fans, we had speculated about the whole time. Well, what would a Palpatine versus Yoda battle be like? And honestly, we weren't even sure we were going to get that.
No, not at all. I remember being at that time. Because I remember we all always, like you said, speculated about what would happen if Yoda and Palpatine ever got into it. But this definitely answers the question that we got in Empire, which I was so glad that they put this in here. Because it gives it context when he's telling, Luke to don't underestimate the Emperor.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, how would he know that unless they had some interaction somehow? I mean, they could have played it vague and saying like, okay, well, the fact that he was able to block, all the Jedi from seeing into the Force
and deceive everybody,
powerful, and deceive everybody, and then of course lure Anakin to the dark side. I mean, he's pretty good at what he does. And they could have left it at that. Yeah. But the fact that they added something like Yoda has real contextual experience as to why I'm saying it to you. Like, look, dude, no.
Well, yeah. That's it.
Trust me. He may look old and feeble, but so did I.
Well, and that's like, exactly. And that's basically one of the things that I think was interesting is that you have two guys that are, for a human, Palpatine's up there in age at this point, and Yoda, of course. They're these grandmasters in their own, disciplines. So true. I just think that was really kind of a cool thing. And then of course you get the, the big epic battle. But what I really liked about this yes, it was probably one of the best lightsaber duels as far as choreography goes, hands down.
Absolutely.
And it was also epic in scale, and it ticked all the fan service points. But what I really enjoyed that I think people overlook is the beginning dialogue of this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because at first, Anakin's just like, look, man, just walk away. You know, I won't bother you. You know? Well, I mean, it's kind of like either walk away or join me. It's kind of like, if you want to be with the Republic, join me, join our actual Chancellor / Emperor, and, you know, we're good. Or if you don't, just walk away. And then they started debating, and, you know, of course, the whole, your empire. I mean, that was kind of funny too, but just all of that I thought was really interesting. The way that there was that, okay, the last time we saw them talking was as friends, and now this is where they're at. But it wasn't like they were sworn enemies, okay, I'm instantly going to kill you type of a thing. There was still that, out of respect for you, I'm going to, you know, that kind of a thing. They were debating their positions.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. You know, and they're both, like you said, they both were debating their philosophy or ideologies. Yeah, 'cause he's like, well, then you are lost. You know.
And then it went into aggressive negotiations.
Yeah, that's when, of course, he's like, you know, Obi-Wan's like, I would do what I must, and then Anakin says, "You will try." I was like,
oh yeah,
and boom, I was just like, it's like a bomb went off.
Oh yeah, and I mean, what a crazy epic duel that was. And then it didn't end so well. You know, Anakin, the problem is, of course, you know, we all have the whole high ground jokes, which is great. I mean, I still point out that part in Empire Strikes Back, which if you watch our review of it, we pointed out there too, where, you know, and I know it was totally accidental because none of this dialogue was written back in 1980, but when Luke was like at the top of the stairs and Vader was at the bottom and he looks up and goes, Obi-Wan has taught you well. That was just such a stupendous coincidence. But the big thing, besides him frying, this is where Anakin's hatred is really, now it's fully developed. You know, he's full-blown hatred mode at this point. And I thought it was really telling when, you know, he's like, I hate you, and Obi-Wan's like, I loved you. You know, it's...
Yeah.
I mean, the one, and this is the other thing in this scene too that I thought was, it was unintentionally funny. It was like delivered in a really emotional, and you know, it was supposed to tug on your heartstrings, but I ended up cracking up when he was like, you're supposed to bring an balance to the, or bring an end to the Sith, not join them or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. He's supposed to end the Sith, not join them.
I'm like, yeah.
Well, the fact that he's being scolded while he's being scalded, you know, it's kind of hilarious.
Scalded while he's scolded. I like that. That's good. That's what I should have put there. Scalding and scolded while he's scalding. Yeah.
But yeah.
And then, of course, we get the birth of the twins, right? I mean, and so to me, this is the only weak part of the whole movie.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Well, there's a couple of things, but just given this, it's sort of like they rush through this birth thing, and you know, they show a kid, Luke, Leia. It's like, wait a minute now. I mean, slow down. This is Rise of Skywalker type pacing we got going on over here. What is this? You know,
I mean, when people say they were seconds apart, man, they weren't lying.
No, they weren't. Just pumping those kids out like no tomorrow.
Well, the thing is, I hated was the whole, you know, she dies from a broken heart, basically.
Well, we'll get to that because I gotta. Okay. I mean, that's just so stupid. But what I liked was this juxtaposition. While she's giving birth, he's being rebuilt.
Yeah, so he's being reborn into somebody else.
And I mean, if you really want to torture this, you could say that while she's having labor pains, he's having, mechanical on lava burn pains.
Well, yeah. Well, the thing is, it's kind of like you said. The juxtaposition of this is really powerful because on one hand, you have the birth of the new hopes, but the death of Padme. But then you have also like the last remnants of the death of Anakin and the true birth of Darth Vader at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like I like how they kind of did that.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of really cool symbolism and everything going on here. And then, of course, yes, this dying of a broken heart thing. I mean, what lazy writing that is. And there's a couple of memes that actually went around that made this even sound sillier. I forgot. I wish I can remember the one that goes around all the time that I share from time to time. But I mean, this is just so silly. This was dumb. But I have to say, the funeral itself though was kind of cool. I mean, and then they showed those like really cool close-ups of her and stuff. And I mean, I know this is starting to sound like a necrophiliac here. Dude, she was hot.
Well, as long as she wasn't wearing the white outfit.
White outfit, right? Even in death, you're gonna be sexy. What can I say?
But here's my thing though. One of the things I thought was really cool and touching was that they put that little thing in her hand from Anakin.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the little necklace.
Yeah.
Well, an angel now.
Yeah.
And then of course, as she dies, Darth Vader is born.
He rises.
Which I thought was really cool too when, Palpatine just couldn't resist, like, well, I'm afraid in your anger you killed her. And, that stupid no, and then he's like lumbering like a Frankenstein, which, I mean, that's realistic. I have to say, I will give him a little bit of points for that.
Yeah. My thing is, did he really know at that time if she died though? Like maybe news got back at that point and Palpatine kind of heard about it. But did he tell Vader that just to make him even more angry, but not really know if it was true? Or did he know it was true and was just like,
I'm sure he knew it was true because he could probably feel it through the Force. Especially her being another Nabooan, whatever they call him. But I mean, I will have to say too that the disappointing thing, it was cool to see mechanical Vader. It was just a little disappointing in, I think, the limited amount of time that we got him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, granted, I guess they would have had to do like a 3-hour movie if they wanted to do that, but you know what I mean? It's just, I don't know. I mean, how did you feel about it?
This was, I wanted the voice of like Vader. I wanted I wanted to see Empire Vader, basically.
Yeah.
Like the gravitas that Empire Vader kind of carried. But of course we couldn't get.
Yeah.
Even A New Hope Vader was kind of,
Well, that was like 10 years later, though. Or no?
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying, like, just saying the gravitas that he carried. But I mean, it was cool. Like when they were finally complete the helmet and they slid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was
the
cool.
top part off, and then he took that first breath.
Yep.
And you saw the air move up, and you're just like, man, it just gave you all the feels.
That part I thought was incredible, actually. Yeah, that was cool. And then, of course, Yoda landing on Dagobah. I thought that was a nice touch, too. That, of course, the one, my favorite part is when he's looking all freaked out. He's like, hurry.
Yeah, he was like, get me out of here.
I mean, it was just like, you could tell, man. He's just like, dude, this is... And I loved it. I loved it how Palpatine was like, Didn't find a body? Go look. Find the body.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
And it shows that Yoda probably had this as a plan. Like, okay, Dagoba's full of life. It's going to amplify the Force. I'm going to pull a Palpatine and block him. I mean, he may not have fully formed this plan at that point, but I think it was in there.
I think I think at some point, he probably was like, okay, because we still don't know where his species comes from. Maybe
Yeah,
Dagobah
I
was
know.
originally his home planet to begin with. Because you got to think about it, it's like it's full of those little creatures that Grogu likes to eat, and we saw him crunching on some stuff the first season of Mandalorian, right? And then because we always wonder like, well, how is Yoda so strong in the Force initially? But it's like he comes from a planet that's full of life forms.
Yeah.
So maybe that amplifies, I don't know.
That would
So
be
maybe
the
that was originally his
funniest
home to.
that would be the funniest revelation ever. Is if you find out Dagobah was the home planet of these guys. There's
Mhm.
not a whole lot of them around.
Right. Well, that's just that one area of Dagobah. Once again, it's
Well, it is
the
an
whole
entire
planet.
planet. Yeah, that's a
So.
all right. I gotcha. And then of course, seeing Tarkin, Palpatine, Vader early on, the sort of exoskeleton or framework,
Yes, the AV drop of the Death Star.
Yes.
If
Yeah.
Chad's watching, he'll probably appreciate
Yeah,
that.
if Chad's watching, he will definitely appreciate that. Yeah, that was actually pretty cool. And it also added to where it made more sense. Because remember how they showed the little hologram of it with the Geonosians and all that? Yeah. It's kind of like, okay, now it's being further built. And it would have to be because Rogue One basically takes place right up against them, maybe like 18 years or something after. So, I mean, yeah, it would take a while. I mean, here in Michigan, they're still working on I-75 half the time. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, it takes like 10 years to finish a freeway. This thing has got to take a while. I'm just saying. So that was pretty cool. And then, of course, you get this shot of, Beru and Owen Lars, maybe they're the New Hope. So, I mean, this is pretty. I thought that this was a nice touch. This is something that they shot during episode 2, actually. But, they made it there. I don't remember how many of these I actually had. No, that was it. So, yeah. So, it was nice that they sort of ended on that whole...
The twin son.
Yeah, the twin sons. They had the twins. Of course, Bale, was like, well, we always wanted to adopt a girl. And they at least... Even though, again, I think the pacing was bad, I think they rushed through all of that really quickly. And then, of course, Yoda, we didn't show anything on this, but he was aboard the Tantive 4 again with Obi-Wan, like, hey, more training I have. Qui-Gon, they revealed that Qui-Gon had figured out how to become a Force ghost. So they actually packed a lot in that little tiny window, But, again, even though I think they rushed through it, I thought it was satisfying. I thought that the explanations were good. And of course, it was expanded on a little bit in Obi-Wan, which I really appreciated. So that was cool. So overall,
Definitely.
What are you doing? What are you giving it?
Revenge of the Sith gets a 9.5 for me.
Nearly a perfect score.
Yeah, nearly a perfect. I mean, of course, the last end of it, like the last maybe quarter or a third of it, I should say, maybe. Yeah, it just from the whole Padme birth thing, it kind of had that, like you said, the Rise of Skywalker pacing, so that kind of takes you out of it a little bit. But other than that, though, it probably would have been a perfect movie because They answered a lot of questions. They packed it in. They expounded, or they gave you enough. They had a lot of symbolism, a lot of allegory, a lot of different things that really cemented, you know, this story. So yeah, 9.5 for me.
I was going to give it an 8.5, but I'm going to sneak it up to 9 because they showed Jar Jar and he didn't say anything. He just kind of
Right.
lumbered through. And I mean, I just think that, again, I'm not going to quite give it quite as high because even though I agree with all your points, I still think, in a lot of parts, the acting was still a little stiff. There was still a lot of reliances on certain things. I mean, but again, the story was fantastic. All the subplots were really good. For the most part, I thought the pacing was pretty good until that very last section. Even though it had a few problems, I thought that this is by far the greatest of the prequel movies. It's actually one of the best in the franchise. So,
Truly.
yeah, absolutely. But the question isn't us, it's you guys. Now, we have now completed the prequels. We've gotten the original trilogy done. We've gotten the prequels. If you're not sure what's going on, we're going into what is Star Wars. We're pointing out some things. So we're not just going back and reviewing these films. We're really delving into them to, how does this actually make Star Wars what it is? How does it further define what Star Wars is? We really get into the analysis of this, which is why we're going to end up redoing The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, because we're going to come at it differently. Plus, it's a number of years since the original reviews came out. But again, every Monday, 8 o'clock live, until we're finished with this, basically. We're going to continue going into what is Star Wars. So the next time, Solo, right?
Solo.
All right, so this coming Friday, of course, we're going to continue our review of The Bad Batch. We ended up getting a little bit behind on those, so we're going to still try to figure out, because episode 10, I think, comes out Wednesday, so maybe we do 8 and 9, and then maybe the week after we do 10 and 11 and catch up. So we'll try to figure that out. But either way, check us out on Friday at 8. We're going to be doing The Bad Batch, continue our review. And if you like this channel, you want to subscribe to it, hit the subscribe button. If you like the video, hit the like button. Hit the notification bell so you guys are notified when we do go live or when we do upload new content. And, until then, I guess we will see you guys Friday night at 8. So with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.